Just getting ready to say where were we, but then I saw Mr. Nelson up there, so I guess that's where we were.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Hunsaker, I think I'm going to start with you at least. I might, on occasion, asking you two questions, I might get a little confused. If one of you wants to hop in when I'm asking a question or the other, please feel free to do so.
I'll do that.
Ms. Hunsaker, to start with, you provided information regarding the Customer Connect. Can you tell me again how much it is that the company is asking for specifically?
Total program?
Yes, ma'am.
The total program for DEC South Carolina is $60 to $70 million range.
Okay. And what are you collecting in O&M expenses out of that amount?
It's about a 50-50 split between O&M and capital.
Okay. In your testimony, too, you talk about, and I'm looking at, this is your rebuttal testimony, page 6, starting at line 8 through line 15. You're talking about the additional forecasted costs to cover inflation and contingency, and that's $1.8 million. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you agree, first of all, where's that number come from? Where do you get that $1.8 million number?
So when we did the original estimate, it was 2016, and in 2016 it was a Class 4 estimate. And so when we looked at that, we had a number of areas that they were kind of known unknowns when you think about contingency. And we knew we needed to get through the design phase, at least the high-level design phase, to have a very good idea of that. And so that was contingency based on that. We are now through that design and have taken that contingency and allocated all but about $400,000 of that. So today we set with about $400,000 in the contingency bucket. The rest of it has been allocated either to the fixed fee contracts, to our interface bucket, or Duke staffing to accommodate that.
Okay, so what about the inflation part of that? Is that still something that's included in your estimate?
It is. There's about $402,000 in there now left of contingency and about $68,000 of inflation.
Okay. Where do you get the inflation number from?
The inflation is really just kind of how we've worked with accounting to accommodate what inflation looks like over time through the project.
I noticed in your testimony you talk about those inflation and contingency fees were calculated using appropriate methods. The company Project Management Center of Excellence commissioned an independent estimate review committee. Could you tell me what the independent review committee is? Yes,
we have a Project Management Center of Excellence, and it's really how we created all of our estimates. And it is a methodology that we use for projects of certain sizes to go through. They have standards, and then what we do is we bring a number of project experts in from around the company, and we form an independent estimate review, and they come in and have oversight over the estimates to ensure that we are using proper project management protocol.
So when it comes to doing like an inflation estimate like this, then is it engineers doing it? Is it economists doing it? Who sits on that committee that tries to figure out where inflation is supposed to be going?
So we have some of our finance and accounting individuals on that committee.
Okay. These are all Duke employees that sit on the committee?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea what the range was that they actually found that produces this $400,000 number?
For the contingency?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
The contingency initially set at about 30%. Mm-hmm. Today it's setting at about 15%. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Are you, a general question here, I guess, too, are y'all aware of the methodology that's typically used in rate making, the historical test year standard?
Generally speaking, kind of high level. Mm-hmm.
Do you understand that there are some allowances that are made for known and measurable changes to those test year numbers, correct? Do you consider this estimation of the inflation costs to be something that is known and measurable, or is it just an estimate?
That is something I would have to look to perhaps Witness Smith to talk about.
Okay.
I can tell you the confidence I have around the rest of that contingency bucket. I feel very confident that money is already earmarked. We've already signed contracts for the rest of that, all but $400,000. We've signed contracts for. We've already hired the employees. So I feel very confident. If you look at that initial $1.8 million, that all of it, but about $400,000, I feel very comfortable that they are very known and measurable.
When are customers going to first see the benefits of the Customer Connect plan? When does it go into effect?
We started delivering in June of 2018, so customers have already had benefits from that. Customers will not actually see something in their hands or something different until early 2020 when we do the universal bill format that I spoke of earlier. But we are leveraging data today behind the scenes to serve our customers in very different ways. And an example of that would be during the hurricanes that we had. We were able to pull together customer experience data along with interaction data and really change the way that we communicate with our customers during the hurricane. So they are receiving benefits, but they may not see it associated to Customer Connect.
Thank you. Ms. Hunsaker, were you here yesterday when Ms. Smith was testifying?
Yes, I was.
And did you hear her testify regarding the Customer Connect costs and kind of compare the ORS position to the Duke position?
I did, yes.
And are you aware that in, I think it was Ms. Smith's or Mr. Payne's rebuttal testimony that ORS had changed their position regarding some of those costs?
Yes.
And could you tell the Commission what the difference is?
My understanding of that? Okay. My understanding is that the ORS is comfortable with the inclusion in rates of the actual spend in 2018. And that's about $3.2 million roughly. The additional that's really allocated to the inflation and contingency, you do not believe it's known and measurable.
Okay. So that's the difference between the, 4.7 million you requested, right? Okay.
That's correct.
And for the both of you, again, deferrals, are the deferrals something that y'all are familiar with as far as the deferral accounts that Duke Energy has?
That would be something that we would need Witness Smith to speak of.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Schneider, don't want to leave you out.
Thank you.
Are you the person that's primarily responsible for Duke's AMI deployment?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Have you been made aware, or were you in attendance at a lot of these night hearings when we have heard a lot of issues about people complaining about their AMI meters?
I was not able to attend, but I did have a person that supports me that did attend and shared some of those with me.
Do you have a explanation as far as why a lot of people testified to the Commission that they saw as much as a doubling of their bills? What's going on there? Can you explain it?
Yeah, so we see this across all our jurisdictions, and it's usually tied with changes in weather. So when we're deploying right before a cold period or right before an extremely warm period, if we happen to change out the meter, and then the next bill is unusually high because of the extreme cold or the extreme heat, we do get complaints that it was due to the smart meter. We follow up on all those complaints. We have, I tell you, we have currently or in DEC, DEC and DEP, all of South Carolina, we have only had 21 complaints that have escalated up to the point of in-depth investigation, and only one of those did we realize there was an issue, and it was not related to AMI. It was related to another program that we've got going on. I think we talked about this customer yesterday in testimony, and in that case, it's a program we've got. It's called Home House Panel. And it's where Duke provided the customer's electrical panel as part of a program years ago. And those panels need to be updated. So we're going out and we're updating those panels. And that customer that had that concern, we did look at his bill, and it did go up. I believe it was December, unusually high and compared to the prior couple years that we looked at. And when we went back to the HP Home House Panel, HHP program management team, they were at the same time investigating it as well. And they did find that they had some GE breakers that are part of that home panel replacement program that were rejected. They were failures, and GE handled it. And that customer had one of those breakers. And so that breaker tripped erroneously, and that caused his backup resistive heat to come on. And so in that case, we did finally settle a claim with that customer to make him whole for that additional usage due to that breaker damage. Had nothing to do with AMI.
When you have these complaints about a reading, do y'all go out and physically do a check of the meter, or with these AMI meters, is that something that you do remotely?
No, so if a customer requests, we do, just like we have for years, we will go out and test the meter. We can do that on site. And I can tell you to date, and also in an annual filing of a meter testing summary filing that we file with the commission, we have not had a single AMI meter that has tested outside the thresholds that are required by the commission.
Have y'all heard of any other companies, and I know a lot of the co-ops like in South Carolina are using these now. Have you heard of any other companies? Have you had an exchange of information that there are any particular problems with these meters?
Yeah, so we regularly attend user group meetings with Itron, who is the meter vendor. And so we converse regularly with other utilities that are using the same product, and never have I or any of my folks ever heard of any conversations around inaccuracy of any of the AMI meters.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. We got all the interveners. Okay, so we're time for commissioners, and I'm going to go first this time. Ms. Hunsaker. On the customer information system, is the customer information that you're gathering considered confidential?
It is the same type of data that we've always gathered. It is we have privacy that rules that when you look at customer name with Social Security or with address, but it's nothing new and different than what we've gathered before. Before this, we had a lot of the data, but we had it in separate databases, so we couldn't correlate it to any level of analytics. So we've just brought that same data together in a central repository where we could just gather new findings.
So who has access to that in the company?
Right now, it's our data scientist. Some of our group that does communications, they run customer lists to be able to do an outbound marketing campaign, let's say on budget billing or because of high bill. So those are the groups right now within the company outside of our project team that have access to that.
Do you ever sell customer information or plan to sell customer information to third-party vendors?
We do not.
Now or in the future?
We have no plans.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Schneider, on the AMI meters, do the meters that you've deployed, and I think you're pretty close to fully deploying, are they going to be? Do they have the capabilities that you want them to have for the foreseeable future? I mean, are they going to last a while?
Yeah, yes, they do. There's not any other technology that's been introduced that provides any benefits beyond what we can get out of these meters.
Okay. Let's see, one other question I had for you, Mr. Schneider. I think it's for you. With the prepaid advantage plan, all right, you're planning to move it from pilot status to, I guess, full status. Has it been going that well? What are the drivers that are getting you there?
Yes, so we have seen successes out of the pilot. I think some of them we reported in a learnings report that was filed, I believe, late 2017. In general, the pilot was to determine the feasibility of the technology, and we did that. Likewise, customer Satisfaction was extremely high. We had a lot of great comments. I think they were included in that filing as well. Customers really liked the program, and so we want to open that up and make it available to all our customers.
Comment a little bit just on the relative usage of the pilot program by different income levels of folks. Do you have that, or do you know who's using?
I don't believe that was part of the learnings report, and I don't know that we captured that in terms of customer income class.
Okay, so it's just random.
Yeah, I think though we can tell by the results again that were in the learning that the customers on average made 3 payments a month, and so they're relatively small payments. Mm-hmm. It's and it's really geared more towards people that want to better understand their usage and have the option and control of when they pay their bill. Mm-hmm. They understand it better. And a lot of customers' comments from that learnings report was that they appreciated the program because it did allow them to see better into their usage, not just get that big bill at the end of the month, so they could control that amount. And likewise, they could put money towards their account when they had money available.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Snyder, quick question for you. On pages 10 and 11 of the DE Carolinas application, the company discusses the rollout of the Customer Connect, for which AMI plays a key role. You discuss additional value to customers regarding the system. Are customers requesting specific choices, insight on their uses, or expanded options and flexibility in their interaction with the company? Is that something that's coming from the ground, or?
Yes, it is. We are involved we have several focus groups, and we continually to get that sort of response in general from customers that they want more options, more flexibility, more transparency. The other place that we see it is in J.D. Power's survey results. If you look at the utilities that have had AMI implemented for more than a year, you consistently see the customer satisfaction scores for those utilities come in higher than the utilities that don't have AMI. So those are a couple things that I think proves to us, and then also, again, the comments from the prepaid advantage learnings really show us that customers are expecting a lot more out of the utilities today in terms of control, convenience, and transparency in their usage.
Can you identify the customer class and residential customer demographics where those requests come from?
Large majority are residential.
What about socioeconomic?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. Is there any way, and this may be a question for Ms. Hunsicker, is there any way to track customers who are struggling to pay their bills or have unusually high bills with Customer Connect?
Yes, there will be. So, we can identify customers struggling to pay many of the same ways we do today. We'll be able to look at how late is their payment, right? How many days until the due date. What we'll be able to do with Customer Connect is do a lot more outbound communications. Think about how customers might want to be communicated with based on where they sit. So we will have a better view. We will have a better view of that with Customer Connect and be able to act upon it.
I'm glad you brought up action. So what would be the follow-up action if you identified that a customer couldn't pay their bill on time repeatedly, or they're experiencing abnormal usage or high bills? What would be the company's response?
Okay, so what we just rolled a release out in February, and one of the things we did with that release is we rolled it out to the customer care specialist at the call centers first. And what we did is we said, let's look at the customer, let's look at how they've been able to, kind of what their behaviors have been, and let's recommend what might be best for them. And so what might happen in that situation is on the specialist screen, it'll say, offer this customer budget billing, right? we believe this customer is calling in about a high bill, walk them through the high bill analyzer. And so there is information that we're presenting to the customer care specialist based off what we're learning. Our goal is to roll that in as we get to the end of September of this year and into next year, roll that into our online services as well as mobile apps so that customers know that we know a bit about them and we may know what they're struggling with. The other thing we're going to do is roll some level of intent prediction into our IVR, and that will happen in the November timeframe.
So could you tell me a little bit more about customer expectations when communicating with the utility, or what type of experiences they're expecting to have? I think several of you talked about, I guess, increased expectations customers may have for communicating with their utility.
Absolutely. So we have looked at a lot of our internal survey data. Witness Snyder talked about some of that. We have J.D. Power surveys. We have internal transaction surveys, which kind of help us understand how well we're serving customer during any set transaction, right? So you want a new service or you want a turn on, something like that. We also have a survey that is called CX Monitor. And we sent out in this year across the enterprise about 500,000 surveys to customers to begin to really understand how we're serving them and how we could get better. And we are sending those out to customers both that have had an interaction with us and who have not had an interaction with us. And we're using that to begin to inform how we need to think about designing for the future. We're beginning to understand, and we've kind of changed internally how we think about customer, and we've got a kind of a customer loyalty score that we're looking at, and we're leveraging that to put projects on a road month every quarter to get better and better, as well as informing what kind of design we need to do. So that's internal. External, we have leveraged Accenture's. They have an arm of Accenture that's called Fjord. And what they do, they brought in what they're calling their new energy consumer report and trends. And we leveraged that to begin to design kind of what that customer experience should be for the future. And we did that design, we didn't, but they talked to a number of customers across the U.S. to understand what is it that you want from a service provider, not necessarily utility, but what is it that you want from a service provider? And that's some other data that we've been leveraging.
Have you been able to mine any data just from South Carolina specifically?
I'm sure we have. We mine it by jurisdiction, and we look at that monthly.
As a customer, should your customers in South Carolina expect to have the same customer experience on their app, on their computer, and if they called in over the phone?
That is our goal. Our goal is to have channel alignment, right? And so if you're a customer and you're interfacing with us on one channel, whether that's the IVR, a voice call, your web, online services, you should always get the same information. There may be some things that fit better in one channel than another, but the experience and what we offer to you as a customer should be the same. You should get the same answer, right?
Would you be surprised to know that customers during the night hearings spoke about issues with the call center not having a very positive customer experience and having difficulty addressing their problems?
It was surprising the amount. So I was not there, but I got a lot of feedback. My role prior to coming into this is I had accountability for all the call centers. And so I understand that. I understand that there are opportunities always to train. That's part of where my passion comes from for Customer Connect, to get the right tools and the right capabilities in both our customer and our employees' hands. One of the things that we're trying to do with Customer Connect, and we're talking about 2021, is to shore up. I heard you talk about communications. That seemed to be a breakdown in some of what you heard from our customers. And what we're trying to do is to give the tools to the customer service specialists so they see a much more broader view of our customers. Today, they don't have the tools on their desks to be able to put this big communication together. They're not able to see that this customer just got a letter, maybe a door hanger, something like that. And so when the customer calls in, they're not able to get that full view. They try very hard, but we make it difficult sometimes based on our tools. As we roll out Customer Connect, we are building robust communication outbound, but we're also building a communication governance structure so that we're able to see everybody within Duke that has touched that customer. Those types of things, I think, are going to make it better. I believe we'll be able to have more of a seamless view of what our customers are going through. So it's unfortunate to hear that. We're trying very hard to ensure that doesn't happen through training and those types of things. But we do have bumps in the night, and those are our opportunities to take the feedback, take whatever those complaints are, figure out what processes are broke, and make it better.
Do you have any opinion on whether or not a brick and mortar customer service center in your service territory would increase the customer experience? We've heard several customers say it used to be a time where they could come into an office and actually talk with someone or pay a bill in person. Is that model outdated and antiquated?
We haven't had that model for a while at Duke Energy. I don't have any specific examples that I can say, that it would be better or worse. We have piloted that a couple times where we had issues in a community where we've taken a group of folks out into the community and had conversations. And I think that has proved positive for us, but we haven't gone as far as to look at, a brick and mortar building.
Okay. Last question for you, ma'am. On pages 22 and 30 of Witness Howitt's pre-filed direct testimony on behalf of the NAACP, South Carolina Coastal Conservation League, and Upstate Forever, the witness asserts that D. Carolina's declined to respond to certain data requests because the requested information was not available. When does D. Carolina's receive? Oh, I'm sorry. Reading from the wrong page. When does D. Carolina's expect to have available a better breakdown of its customer data by demographic category?
Is that something you want to answer?
Sure. So that was, I think you're referring to data request 3-2.
That's correct.
Okay, 3-2. Yeah, we currently, in our current billing systems, do not have that data broken down by the categories that you're referring to. So I think with Customer Connect, we will have more options to break down that. I'm not exactly sure what categories we'll have in Customer Connect, but we will have more detail on our customers.
Okay, do you have a anticipated date when that information will be available?
So Customer Connect will go in. We will be delivering Customer Connect at that level in the spring of 21. That's when the new billing system will go in. We will look to see what any requirements that we have to be able to kind of slice the data and get the data out. We'll react to whatever requirements that are in front of us at that time.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Irvin.
One of the frustrations that we heard at I believe all three of the public hearings in the upstate, Spartanburg, Anderson, and Greenville, were that customers were receiving these flyers in the mail separate from their bills, which gave them feedback on their energy usage. And a lot of customers were asking, why couldn't that be sent with the bill to save postage and maybe printed in black and white to save cost? Have you gotten that feedback yet? Have you heard about that?
I have not heard that feedback specifically.
Would you look into that? Because it does seem that you have, over 600,000 customers in Duke Energy Carolinas? That's a lot of postage and a lot of handling. It would seem logical that you could sync up that report with the bill, the monthly bill. And I think it's a legitimate concern. It's a cost saver, too, for you. And could you report back to us in terms of maybe an action plan on how that could be changed and implemented.
Yes, I'll take that.
And I will just also add that there is an online report that customers can opt out of the paper report and actually get that home energy usage report online.
Right.
If they want
I
to,
don't
through
know
their
that
email.
people know that.
Yeah.
The word is not out, apparently, because there was a lot of frustration about that. So I think it would build trust and confidence with the consumer base if you could consolidate it in some way or just make it online, maybe at a period of time. Just, we're going to transition to online only so that you can save those costs of printing and postage handling. The other concern that came out in the public hearings was the disconnect between calling in trouble hotspots or troubleshooter type requests to the call center, and then there being a total breakdown with operations. And the one that comes to mind, and I think your president has maybe already noted this earlier in his testimony, but the man at the HOA called and said, "We've got 6 bulbs out in the pool. Can somebody come out and replace them?" And so the next thing he knows, it got 2 big pole trucks out there with 2 highly trained linemen, and they get out there and they said, "We don't do that. We have an independent contractor that handles pool lights. We can't touch it." And then so a few weeks later he calls again and the trucks roll out again, and they say, "We told you we can't do that." And so there's got to be a way to fix that disconnect between the call center and the operations side so that if a call comes in, the customer service rep is trained to tell operations what specifically the problem is, what materials they need. If it is a pool lights, refer them to the independent contractor first without even calling operations. That kind of thing really costs money to roll out those highly trained people for a simple call like that. How can we fix that?
I think fixing it comes in 2 ways. One is making sure every time we have an opportunity, we circle back and follow up on training, make sure that our specialists understand what is expected and the impacts they're having down the line by not getting the right information or asking the right questions. I think it starts there. From there, then we need to figure out if it's a performance issue of that individual or if it's a training gap.
It could be both.
Could be both, absolutely. And then we've got to make sure our processes are absolutely tight.
Right.
All of those processes, as we think about Customer Connect, are going to be relooked at.
Right.
Right. Many of those are very old, and processes, whether it's in the field or in the call center, continue to change, and they don't always get updated. And so I know those aren't good ways to talk about it, but we really have to look at these as an opportunity to get better.
Absolutely.
Put the right things in place.
I'd like to challenge you all to work on that because I think there's a tremendous cost savings there for everyone, and it also would improve customer confidence and trust in the system if they feel like you're not only being responsive, but you're being intelligently responsive to request. The last lady we had testify in Greenville, I don't know if you heard about her, but she had a safety issue actually where lines were sparking outside her house, and they sent out crews and nothing happened. So I think your attorney actually cited that. Ms. Smith, didn't you believe you got onto that one that night because it was a safety issue where squirrels were being electrocuted and dropping in the backyard and all that. So somehow or another we got to figure out a way to be a little bit more responsive to these type calls so that they get answered quickly. The other thing I wanted to bring up, we're all concerned in this day and age with the confidentiality of personal data. And will you, as a company, commit to never sell customer information to third parties? Would you go ahead and make that commitment unless you seek an order from the commission and give us some reason why that data should be sold or shared with others? Will you make that commitment now?
I don't think I can commit on behalf of the company. I know we do not have any plans to do that, but we can take that back.
Well, and I appreciate that you don't have plans for it, but I think it might be helpful for us as a commission to allay any concerns, because they're coming. I'm sure they'll be coming. People will say, "What about all this data? How do we know it? Who's going to get access to it?" And I think that's a legitimate concern. And so I would like to be able to say we have a standing commitment from Duke Energy that data will never be sold unless they first seek administrative approval from the commission. And I don't think that's asking for too much, because, we're seeing it time and time again with providers like Facebook and others that have not protected consumer passwords and personal information. In fact, have sold it to other third parties for profit, and nobody finds out until years later, and then after people have been hurt by it or damaged. So I'd like to ask you for that commitment, and I'd like to, if I'm going to be asked to approve the money, I'd like to have that commitment in advance. I think I'd feel a lot better about giving you the money to update your system if you'll make that commitment. So that's my expectation. If you can give us that in writing, that you'll never do it unless you seek our approval, then I'm going to look much more favorably on your request. And I think it's certainly a great idea to upgrade a system that's that old. The final question I have is, anytime you roll out a new system, there are going to be little glitches and that come up. I was wondering if you thought about doing a pilot system where you just take a zone or a region and work out the kinks before you implement it system-wide. Is that something you considered?
We did consider that. It's very hard to do that in a large meter to cache.
Right.
And so what we did is the way we laid the project out was very different, and we tried to do a number of pilots and proof points. But when we get ready to replace ACIS, we have to do it all at once. But some of the things that we've done very intentionally is the data first, right? Bringing all this data together helps us begin to cleanse the data and make sure our data is good. Data cleansing is a big issue in conversion for big system replacements. And so we feel like we're going to address the data first. And then we're also, as we rolled out in February, the first piece of functionality of the call center, we're starting to change for our customer care specialist already. They're seeing the screens that they're going to see in 21 and 22. So we're trying to advance some of that change. And as we go forward with our universal bill, we're trying to pull the customer through some of the change early. So we're trying to advance some of that in a way to break it down, but we really aren't able to do a pilot.
That makes sense. It does. And so I'm pleased to hear you're anticipating that, and you've got a handle on it. The final thing, and I'll pass the mic to others. I know there are many questions. I know you're taking steps once you get all this data together to secure it.
Yes.
And perhaps for future reports, I don't want you to give out trade secrets or company security issues, but just if you will reassure us that you've taken reasonable and necessary steps to protect the system, because as we know and we keep reading, there are always foreign hackers that are trying to get into systems. And I'm sure that you're on top of it. Just assure us that you're on top of best practices, that you're taking all necessary steps to secure your system, so we're not vulnerable to hacking and service disruption.
We'll do that.
Thank you. By the way, I want to thank you all for sending representatives to the public hearings. I want to thank your president for sitting through all three. I thought that showed a great deal of sensitivity and patience and understanding. And the people that you had there, I think that sent a message to everybody that you're trying to reach out and trying to help. So I really commend your efforts in that regard.
Thank you. Commissioner Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got a few questions for the panel. I guess I'll start with you, Mr. Snyder. On page 6, I'll give you a second to get there of your testimony where you have the charts. Okay, you got the two charts there, and it appears that, and I think we've had this discussion a little bit already, that the AMI meters have been adopted by Duke, and well, I'll mention Progress while I'm at it, at a low rate compared to the South Carolina Electric Cooperatives. Is that top chart from 20, like a little bit dated from 2016? And I'm looking at the bottom one, which shows the increase overall by all smart meter installations. Or do you have an explanation for why it would appear that they hadn't been adopted? And of course, I guess you could talk in terms of percentages of your total customer base, compared to the total customer base of the co-ops.
Yeah, so what this data is back in 2016. So it is.
So I am looking at.
It is a little bit
dated.
Yes.
Okay.
I think what we found even back then was that the co-ops had already been at 92% AMI penetration.
Prior to this chart you put in there.
The results of this chart show that.
Right.
Co-ops are at 92% in South Carolina. And so I don't know if
Where would you say you compare now to them? And obviously, if they got the jump on you, where would you say you compare?
Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, we're for the most part done in DEC, South Carolina, with our AMI deployment, and we're deploying across all 6 of our jurisdictions with a goal for the enterprise to be completed by the end of 2021.
Okay, I see. I guess really it's more a question about the date of that chart than anything, because the one underneath it goes right on, shows a steady incline right up to 2020.
Right, and that's across the country.
Across the country, right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next, a couple of more questions for the. Might be done with you, Mr. Snyder, but I got a few more. Ms. Quick, not to leave you out. I think you might have been, hopefully you were in the room when I was questioning your president, Mr. Garchitego, about the use of the credit card payments. And I asked him what information did he use to conclude that the credit card payments would double in growth to 20%, and he punted that question to you.
Yep.
So.
Yes. Thank you. So what we did to calculate the 20% is we took our the past 3 years worth of transactions. On average, over those 3 years, transactions being done through credit card or debit card grew on average about 10%. So that's the normal growth we would see year over year, that 10% growth. And then we looked at some industry research. And specifically looked at a study done by a third-party payment processing vendor who said that once you go from a fee program to a no-fee program, your participation in the program will more than double. And so that was part of it. And then the other part of it is I spent a lot of time going through other filings and looking at other utilities and what they had done. And there was a range of anywhere from 5 to 30% growth. And so based on those two, we recommended a 10% growth. Just knowing that the program, once it's a free program, more customers will start paying. So it's a combination of 10% normal average growth, and then another 10% knowing once it's a free program, more customers will adopt that way of paying.
So what do you think the impact to residential customers will be by your projections?
Do you mean by like cents or dollars per customer?
Well, right.
Yep. So I did a high level calculation. So it's less than 45 cents a month. 45 cents.
Okay. Lastly, I guess, Ms. Hunsaker, I'm not going to leave you out. Had a little bit of discussion, I think you did, with both Commissioner Williams and Commissioner Irvin about the customer service, and I know it's been addressed. I think even Mr. Snyder said only 21 of those calls rose to the level of the company investigating. But going back in your history, when you did have a brick and mortar building and people were able to maybe even perhaps go to someone with Duke in the community that they knew, and I know, as we've said, those times are sort of gone. And even prior to the merger with Duke and Progress, I just don't recall quite so many customer service issues. And I know Mr. Gartitego very much put it in perspective when you talk about how many customers you have overall versus what we heard. But again, that is what we heard in those 3 night hearings. And I guess even with the Connect program, with the Customer Connect program, and you got this outbound information, as you're saying, able to see who's touched that customer, what Duke personnel, how many Duke people have touched that customer, what they've received. But there still some of the calls still seem to be disturbing, that when they had a person on the phone, that person couldn't relate to, even if you're seeing the correspondence that customer's gotten from Duke or the other previous contact with other Duke personnel, it still seems like there were some instances in these night hearings where the Duke person on the other end of that line was not able to understand or relate to what that customer had to say. And I guess I'm going to hark back a little bit to the training, and I don't mean just inside the office there. It could be that you're going to have a little bit of in-person training to get them to maybe relate. In some instances, it sounded like there was a disconnect between what the customer needed and what the CSR, the person on the other end of the telephone, directed or was able to do.
Yeah, and I think training is done a lot of different ways. So we have service personnel come in and talk to our specialist. We have a lot of videos where they can actually see what's happening in the field, right? So they're able to envision it. But training is always an opportunity for us. So I think we need to take those and go back and look at how we're training and make sure that we have the proper amount so the specialists are able to connect those dots and provide the service that our customers deserve.
I know there's been just a short time since those night hearings till we started the merits part of this case, and we talked to Mr. Gartitego, and he obviously said yesterday y'all have not had the time to research each one, and I know we had massive amounts of number of people at each hearing, but in the past, I know that you all, as well as other utilities, have pretty thoroughly investigated each complaint, and I hope the company would, and I know you, as Commissioner Irvin said, you had personnel there, but I hope that you will follow up and make sure that you don't leave anyone unsatisfied or an issue unresolved with them. So with that, I thank you, and Mr. Chairman, that's all I got.
Thank you. Commissioner Belzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'll start with Mr. Snyder, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I think you're probably expecting a question from me based on my questions yesterday. But first of all, and this, if you're not the right person, this may go to Mr. Puro too, but you made the comment a couple of times in your summary and in your direct that the smart meters will enable new rate design. How's that going to happen?
So it's really by the capabilities of the meter itself, being able to provide us what we call the interval data, and being able to apply that interval data to different rate structures is physically how it can occur.
You also had some testimony about the prepaid advantage plan, and you mentioned that eligible residential customers could apply. What would those requirements? What requirements make someone eligible for that program?
So there's a few. So, and I don't know if I'll recall all of them, but if a customer is on an equalized payment plan today, they would not be eligible. If a customer has a arrears greater than $500, they would not be eligible. I'm thinking there was some other program that we currently offer. If customers are on that program, they would not be eligible.
But the same requirements that are on the pilot will be the requirements for the
That's
permanent
correct.
plan.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When someone pays when someone's on the prepaid advantage plan, how are the payments allocated in a month? Like, does the first charge go to the base facilities charge and then to the energy portion, or how are payments allocated?
That I cannot answer. I can tell you if a customer does have some arrears when they come into the program, then we do allocate their payment 25% to their arrears, 75% to usage.
To current charges?
To current charges, yes. But in terms of breaking that, the current charge is down by fixed rate or basic facilities charge and usage. I don't know, maybe Witness Peril might be able to answer that one.
Are you aware in South Carolina there are, and I don't know if this is an exemption under this plan, but in times of severe weather, either hot or cold, normal disconnects are suspended. Will that also apply to prepaid advantage?
Yes, it will.
This may have been answered yesterday, but I'm just not that familiar with the AMI smart meter, and in response to some of the testimony received at the night hearing from the customers who indicated that their usage had increased, I was curious as to whether there's some sort of factor that is programmed into the meter. Could a factor have been programmed in incorrectly, maybe a decimal put in the wrong place, that could have increased? Now, you've indicated that a lot of it might have been weather-related from the previous billing to the current one, but are there any factors that are programmed into these meters that come out that in calculating the bill?
No, there's not. So the vast majority of meters are what we call self-contained meters. So you don't get inside the meter, you don't reprogram, you don't make any changes to the meter. Now, larger customers have what we call transformer-rated meters. So the voltage or the amperage is so high that we can't measure it by a self-contained meter. So we have external potential transformers or current transformers to help reduce that down to a current level or voltage level that we can meter. And so in those cases, then we meter at that lower level, and then there is a multiplier that has to be added to that to get back up to the total, the real usage at the voltage.
I think multiplier might have been probably the term I was thinking about, but on a residential meter, there is no need for multiplier.
There is not. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Ms. Hunsaker. Would you refer or go to your exhibit that was attached to your testimony, please? And I want to understand what's on that, if you don't mind, if you could help me.
It was part of my...
Ma'am?
Yeah.
It's on your
the
direct.
discoveries.
Tell me when it says, and I'm just going to start toward the far left, where it says 2016 cap and 2016 O&M, and that may not be a good breakdown because there's very little in the 2016 cap, but you have columns designated as cap and columns designated O&M. Mm-hmm. Tell me what the cap is.
It's capital.
Okay, so that's the capitalized portion.
Correct. That's
At some point, y'all are going to seek to probably put that in rate base. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the O&M are going to be your O&M expenses.
Yes.
Okay. And what are you using the test year as the year that y'all are trying to collect the O&M expenses, or are y'all down there at the far right column where there seems to be an average?
Yes. So what we were asking in addition to the test year is what you see in the bottom right corner, rounding up to 4.7 million.
Okay, so you're asking for 640,000 plus 4.6 million plus a year.
We are asking, for what was in the normal test year,
Okay.
and then an addition of the 4.7.
Okay. And I know you indicated that y'all have signed some contracts, y'all have hired some employees. And I'll get back to those employees in a minute. And so based on that, you say that's known and measurable. Is that your position?
Yes.
Don't let me put words in your mouth. You can disagree with me.
No, I agree with you.
But yet in your testimony and in your summary, I wrote down, the company derived these forecasted expenses using the best and final offers from the selected vendors as the foundation for the estimates. I'm just curious, with the use of forecasts and estimates, how that's known and measurable.
Right. So when I created the testimony, we had not done the second level of estimation. So that's absolutely where we were. We did some forecasting based off of fixed fee contracts. We talk a little bit about the fixed fee contracts, right? So we have a systems integrator who is Accenture. We have EY in as our change leads, and we have fixed fee contracts with them between 2018 and 2022, where they're delivering milestones and we're paying them a fixed amount. In order for them to sign a fixed fee contract, we had to say we will also bring a certain number of Duke resources to the table. And so we agreed and have hired incremental employees to come in so that we can kind of complement that fixed fee. We signed our initial contracts, and then we forecasted a number of other pieces that we would have to hire as we got out of design. So the testimony talks about the view before we exited design. We exited design in very late March, early April, very late February, early March, And so we have re-estimated and entered into additional contracts with a number of vendors, and that has kind of taken that 1.8 down to the 400K that I talked about. Does that help?
I think it does.
Okay.
Now tell me what an incremental employee is.
Somebody who we brought onto the program and their role was backfilled. So it's not taking employees and bringing them in. It is really net new for the program.
Okay, and that's what I was kind of curious about that. In that, I know y'all got a number of employees in different capacities at Duke, and I didn't know if this was creating a bunch of new hires. Are you bringing on a lot of new people, or are you moving people around and then putting people in those other positions?
We're doing both. So the net hires, I would say, are significantly smaller than bringing somebody into the role and then backfilling their position.
Well, what about those employees that are in the old system, the legacy system? What's going to happen to them?
So that we will look at that as we ramp the program down and stand support up. We'll have to look at bringing the two pieces together at that point in time. Right now, we need them focused on running the legacy because we have to keep it going while we're building the new. And that's why we had to bring new resources in and then backfill their jobs, because we need to stay focused on both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now there's going to be a net gain of employees, but once this program is implemented in 2021, you may have excess employees?
It will actually be in 2022 for the enterprise. We'll start our ramp down in 22 and 23. But I think using that and just using appropriate succession planning, I don't think we're going to have amounts of employees, large amounts that are in excess.
And the contracts with the vendors, those are all signed and inked and
They are.
Binding on both parties, right?
That's correct.
At this time.
Yes, that's correct.
That's all I got.
Can I make one clarification?
Yes, ma'am, please do.
When you talked to Witness Snyder about new rate design,
Yes, ma'am.
I want to make sure that we understand that the AMI meter alone is not what you need for new rates. You need the AMI meter in conjunction with Customer Connect.
Okay.
We need the data coming off of AMI, and we need the configurability of rate structures that we're going to get with Customer Connect coming together.
I understand. I just was curious as to how a new meter was going to help with new rate design.
Absolutely.
That's kind of where I was coming from.
Okay, thank you.
It's quick. I'm not going to leave you out. All right. I think you may have some heads up from yesterday because I think Ms. Heather Shirley Smith threw you under the bus yesterday. No, she didn't. She just said I might better direct a question to you than what I. Let's see. Is it less labor intensive to receive a payment via credit card versus a payment that comes in the mail with a check in an envelope?
I've not done the actual comparison, but what I will say is it is fairly cheap when someone mails in their payment. Most of the majority of the payments will run through our machines and are processed, within seconds. But then there are customers who actually staple their check to the bill stub. And so that does require manual intervention. So we actually cannot run those through the machine. So those are more costly to process. So I don't have an actual comparison of dollar to dollar.
I reckon where I was coming from is when you got the envelopes coming in, you got a big mail bag or hopefully a big mail bag getting dumped on somebody's desk. They got to open those things and process those checks versus looking at something coming in electronically. So is there not much difference or is there a difference? You're not sure.
Are you talking about like the $1.50 payment processing fee?
No, I'm wondering if there are any savings. And it kind of goes to the $1.50 because I didn't know if it was more efficient for your employees to process electronic payments versus paper checks that are coming in.
Yeah, it is definitely more efficient for us to process payments electronically. But the $1.50 that is charged on the convenience when customers pay with credit cards or debit cards, that is actually a third party that collects that $1.50. That's not our cost.
I understand, and I understand that y'all are having to pay that. But are there going to be efficiencies and savings from transferring a number of payments from paper to electronic that those may somehow offset?
There could be savings there, but we have not quantified that at this time.
Are the employees who currently process, I can't even read my writing anymore, currently process payments also be the employees who will process the credit card payments? Will they be doing both, or do you have separate departments? Or
all the credit card payments that are processed by a third-party vendor. So
okay.
I have employees internal that process the mail-in payments.
But somebody's got to check behind that third party, don't they? Or not? Y'all trust them?
They have validation ways of validating the payments that come through, and then we do validation, obviously, when we get the payment on our end also.
It just, with the advent of computers, and all this other stuff, we were told that it's going to make our lives easier and it's going to save us time and money in the long run, and I'm still waiting to see where all that's going to happen. That's part of it.
Which also adds to the frustration of customers who are trying to pay online and then having to pay a $1.50 convenience fee too. So,
are you going to be testifying in the progress rate case?
Most likely, yes.
Okay, we'll talk about how long it takes my check to clear from the time I mail it to the time it shows up in my bank then. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't think there would be any questions left when you got to this end, but I do have a couple. Mr. Snyder, in talking with Commissioner Belzer, you mentioned that one of the things that would keep you off of the prepaid advantage program was a $500 delinquency.
That's correct, yes.
What's available if I have a $500 delinquency other than paying the $500 or cutoff?
Well, I believe we offer payment programs. I'm not versed on those. I don't know if Witness Quick might be.
Okay, well, Ms. Quick, we'll hear your answer.
Can you repeat the question again?
Okay, he mentioned that one of the things that would preclude you from being able to be on the prepaid advantage program was if you had a $500 delinquency, you couldn't sign up for that. And what option is left for me if I've got that $500 delinquency?
Sure. We will set up a deferred payment arrangement. So we can either give you a credit extension time to pay that bill, or we can set up various deferred payment arrangements to give you more time to pay the arrearages.
What would be the reason in setting this up on the prepaid advantage program with a part delinquency and a part billing? Looks like you're doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think I think it's customer's preference. So if they don't want to pay a deposit and they get on the prepay program, then we can move them to the prepay program and then let them pay their day-by-day usage or put dollars into the bank until they use it down. So I think it's just another way, if customers want to get on the prepay program, that will allow those customers who are in arrears onto the prepay program, and they don't have to pay the deposit.
Okay, if you have a delinquency or a cutoff, you have to pay a deposit to get back in.
I guess it depends on if this is a start service customer or an existing customer. If an existing customer wants to convert to the prepay program, and has already paid us a deposit, we will refund that deposit once they get on the prepay program.
Okay, thank you. Now let me ask one other thing. How many people do you expect will take advantage of the prepaid advantage program? Do you have a percentage in mind?
Yeah, so while we don't have targets, we have an expectation that it will probably be around 10% of our customers that would take advantage of the prepaid program.
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Something, I'll start with you. You mentioned 3 elements in your platform for your core needs, and that was configuration, adaptability, and customer-centric platform. You just explained, you did touch on it, you explained a little bit in your testimony, but would you go over and explain those again to me, exactly what you mean by configuration, adaptability, and customer-centric platform?
Absolutely. So configurability is really the ability. Today in our legacy systems, so many things. This is an old COBOL mainframe system that was built in the mid-90s, okay? And so a lot of things are hard-coded. They're written in the legacy systems, and it makes very hard to make changes. If you have a configurable system, you have a lot of options that you can drop down. And so with configurability, we're able to do things like rate changes much more easier and much more timely. And so it gives us speed to value on changes in our system. When you think about adaptability, it is really about being able to adapt to the changing needs that are coming from our customers. The onset of renewables, all of those types of things are going to bring a lot of change. And so this system needs to be quickly to be adaptable for both of those. And then the third thing is customer-centric. And today, our legacy systems are meter-centric, which means that everything is tied around the meter. So we have customers tied to a meter, but we don't really know our customers. So when you think about customer centricity, we begin to center everything around the customer, and that ties back to the database. And an example will probably be easier to explain. So I moved to Charlotte 5.5 years ago, and I was a customer in Indiana for many, many years, over 30 years. And when I left, I shut service off in Indiana. I called the Indiana call center. I shut service off. I had auto pay. I was on budget billing. And both of my services, right, were shut off. Everything was shut off. I called the Charlotte Center, and I had to reestablish. I had to allow them to do a credit check to make sure I didn't need to pay a deposit. I had to reset myself up on budget billing, and then I also had to set my auto pay back up. If with a real customer-centric system, they would have known me across all the jurisdictions, and they just would have shut my service off in Indiana and turned it on in Charlotte, and I wouldn't have had to redo all of those things. And so customer centricity is all about really focusing on the customer rather than a meter. Does that help?
Very well. You did a good job, thank you.
Right. Okay.
It's quick. You can relax. I don't have any questions. I'm sure you know something. Mr. Snyder, talking about Wallach, I guess, page 16, he's talking about cost causation. Causation. You know what I'm talking about? Witness Wallace was his name?
Yeah,
Talking about the causation.
I don't recall that, no.
He was saying basically what it was high usage customers got more advantage out of a AMI meter than low usage customers. You agree with that? Are you?
No, I don't agree with that. I think all our customers will gain benefits from the AMI meters in a number of ways. Number one, just by our internal savings from having the capability to remotely read meters, remotely control, shut off, disconnect, reconnect meters. All those savings go back to our customers. And then these programs that we've talked about, Pick Your Due Date, Prepaid Advantage program, as well as usage alerts, and then also the capability of customers to go online and see their usage in hourly increments. All those are geared to all of our customers to take advantage of to help reduce their usage and better understand their usage.
What is the dividing line between a high usage customer and a low usage customer? I know in rate cases and every other adjustment we use 1,000 kilowatt hours for an average customer. But where would that relate to a high and a low usage customer?
I personally do not know. I could only suspect that, as you mentioned, a typical customer is 1,000 kilowatt hours per month. So anybody below that would be a low customer, and anybody above that. Yeah, I don't know that there's a true definition anywhere.
You could probably ask Google that.
I don't know how. Tell me, if I don't have a computer internet connection, how is the advanced meter going to help me at my home?
Well, again, I think there's several things. Just again, by the cost savings that we're seeing from the meters, those savings are reflected back to the customer, and then also the convenience of if you do have a connect or disconnect, the convenience of us not having to roll a truck. You don't have to set up an appointment. You don't have to be there. We can do all that remotely.
What is your life expectancy of your current AMI meters?
So we expect the actual useful life of the meter to be similar to meters in the past. I do believe we are asking, if I remember correctly, a 15-year life for depreciation purposes. And the reason for that is, we feel like if you look back over the years that, and I think, we had the question earlier about is there any technology out there that's providing additional benefits than the AMI? No, as I answered, there is not today, but 10 years from now, 15 years from now, with the advances in technology, there's very likely there could be another meter solution out there that if you looked at, the costs versus the savings, it may be a positive business case that would make it worthwhile to upgrade to a new meter. So again, that could be 10 years, could be 15 years, could be 20 years. But if it does not, then we suspect these meters will last, 30 years or more. There's there's no moving parts in the meters. They're all digital. And so, with the legacy meters, mechanically, they tend to slow down over time. So, we actually have more accuracy issues with the legacy analog meters than we do with the newer digital meters. And digital meters have been around for 10 years or more. But we do have prior to changing out to AMI, we had a mix of analog meters and a mix of digital meters.
Well, that was my thought process, and in my mind, this is the first generation meter, and I'm sure it's not. But in my mind, it's the first generation meter. Do you have in your contract upgrade capabilities? I mean, would your manufacturer, if something new came along, be able to upgrade the current?
Absolutely. So if it's anything from a software perspective, firmware perspective, that's the real beauty of the two-way communications. So we can send updated programs, updated firmware, all that to the to the meter remotely. We don't have to roll trucks. We don't have to change out the meter. The only thing would be if there was something physical, a new physical advantage that's physical in the meter that we would want to take advantage of and have to change the meters out. But as far as upgrades to the systems, back office systems, and then, like I said, remotely uploading firmware updates and software programmer updates to the meter, that's the whole benefit of having this two-way communications.
Thank all three of you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Commissioner Howard. Any others? Okay. Mr. Schneider, just one last quick thing. I think you talked about focus groups at some point.
Yes.
Were your focus groups designed to really be a cross-section of people, or were they just randomly selected?
I don't know that I know the answer. I mean, typically they would be random so that we're getting a good cross section.
Hopefully you get the cross-section of folks. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Commissioner, or Mr. Chairman, excuse me, before we break.
The worst.
I just wanted to ask the panel, have any of you ever heard of the poverty simulator?
I have not.
I have not.
You have. Have any of your customer service employees gone through that poverty simulator?
We have done that. It's been some time ago. I don't know about, currently I left the call center in 2015, but I know prior to that we had leveraged the poverty simulator to help our folks understand the demographics of the customers that they're dealing with. So
I think you understand where I'm going with this line of questioning. It seems from the night hearings to what we're hearing here today that there's somewhat of a disconnect between a certain demographic of your customer base compared to other demographics. And considering, Ms. Hunsaker, your knowledge of the poverty simulator, I think it would be useful if the call center employees had the opportunity to retrain on the poverty simulator, to understand that population and better serve that population, to empower them with the same information that other demographics within your customer base has access to, if that makes sense.
It does. That's something I can certainly go back and have discussions about.
Okay. And Mr. Snyder, real quickly, you said something about the old meters, the analog meters, being a little bit slower than the digital meters.
That's correct. Just because of the mechanical nature,
right,
it will slow down over time.
So would that equal an inaccurate bill for the customer on the low end or on the high end?
On the low end, yes. And so I did fail to mention, out of the 21 cases that were escalated, we were able to, again, look back at the history of the data and confirm that the customer's usage did not increase like they had claimed. It was weather related or other. But we did have one where we could not determine the increase. We tested the new AMI meter, tested perfect, and so we could not determine. And the customer did have an analog meter, and when we went back and looked at their usage, their usage was extremely low when you looked at the size of their house and everything. So it was just, it appeared obvious that that was a case where the meter had slowed down. And I mean, they were talking about bills averaging, $20, $30 a month. And it was a, I can't remember, I think it was like a 1,500 square foot house. And so it was obvious, and I think the customer, understood too that just didn't seem right, and understood after we talked with the customer about the old analog meters slowing down over time, and attributed that increase to that.
And I appreciate you sharing that with me. My point is that it may be useful to have a level of coaching and counseling, and maybe you do this already when an AMI meter is installed, whether it's written, oral, I'm not really sure. Some coaching and counseling with the customer so they know that they may experience a higher bill, considering the possibility that the analog meter is not reading or is not as accurate as it should be, or as accurate as the digital meter, to sort of help address that shock, if you will, of the next bill.
Certainly, we can take that back in consideration. I'll say we are basically done here in DEC, South Carolina, but not in DEP, so we could apply that.
Thank
you. Mr. Chairman, what are you going to do with all those little analog meters?
We are recycling what we can.
That's good. I don't guess there's a secondary market for it overseas or elsewhere.
No, there's not.
We had one lady in Anderson public hearing tell us that power theft is a problem. Do you have someone on the operations side that polices that, or you just rely on tips, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, so we've had a revenue protection organization for as long as I've been with the company. One of the nice things about the AMI meter is by having all this additional data, we do have a group of data analytics, data scientists that have developed algorithms to look at, alerts that the meter gives us, usage patterns, and those sort of things, so they can identify with a lot more accuracy where we may have theft, or in the larger transformer-rated situations where they may have been wired wrong, or the wiring burnt off over time, or those sort of things. So we're able to capture those a lot better with the AMI data.
That's good. You might consider putting a flyer in with a bill sometime if you have, if you suspect theft is, have kind of a community watch program to help us all keep our bills down, and give them a toll-free number to call, because there may be more out there than you suspect. I don't know.
I think it's a great idea.
The final thing I wanted to mention was you talked about different classifications of rates, and I think we're going to be hearing from some farmers when we get to the Progress Energy cases. They have some issues coming up with seasonal metering, where they're trying to water crops for only a portion of the year. And I don't think we have an agricultural classification, but you might want to be preparing for that, because I think we're going to hear from some folks about particularly the concern about the fixed fees on those meters that are only used for 3 or 4 months out of the year. So I appreciate you preparing for that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would request this to you, but you would deny it. But anyway, I'll go ahead and say it. As a member of the NARUT Public Interest Committee, Ms. Hunsinger, we are having that poverty simulation summer meeting in Indianapolis. So you're welcome to come and send people to see the poverty stimulation demonstration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Anybody else? Mr. Robinson, any brief redirect?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a few brief redirect questions. So I'll start with Mr. Schneider. Mr. Schneider, do you recall Commissioner Howard asking you some questions around the benefits associated with AMI meter, regardless of if they have a computer or a phone or some way to tap in?
Yes, I do.
Are there any benefits to customers regardless of that access as it relates to storm response?
Yes, there is. So the AMI meters, by providing us voltage data about when they lose power, data about when they gain power, those communications, as well as, having the capability of what we call pinging or interrogating the meters to determine if they're powered up or not, helps us in number one, the assessment that starts at the beginning of storm restoration, also helps us during the actual storm restoration itself. Where if we're in an area and we think we've got all the customers back on, we can do a mass interrogation of those meters to confirm that power is back up to all the meters before we send those crews on to another location. And then on the back end of at least the larger storms, we have a lot of single customer outage tickets that are still in the system that we have to roll trucks on just to confirm that they were picked up at some time during the storm. And again, by being able to interrogate those meters, we can see if we got voltage. If we do, we know we don't have to roll a truck. So, and we've experienced a lot of savings in all three of those areas in some of the recent storms we've had.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Ms. Hunsaker, do you recall some questions from Commissioner Belzer regarding your Exhibit 1 of your direct testimony?
Yes.
So when I look at your Exhibit 1, it looks to me as if the test year amount, the 2017 amount of $640, plus the additional incremental O&M expense that we are requesting, totals up to $4.7 million. Can you check me on my math?
That's correct.
Okay. Then I have a couple questions for Ms. Quick. Ms. Quick, do you recall some questions from Commissioner Whitfield asking you how you came up with your 20% number? We're in 2019 now, so have you had a chance to review your 2018 data?
Yes.
Okay. And what, if anything, have you seen?
So the average growth that we calculated at 10% was 2014 through 2017. From 2017, that was 10%. So from 2017, by the time I got the year-end data for 2018, there was actually a growth of 22% of transactions in the credit card, debit card realm. So we've seen a higher growth in this past year.
And just to clarify, how does that compare to your projection for the growth, for the 10%?
The 10% compares to the 22%. Yeah. So the 10% was the average 3-year, and then the 22% would be a direct comparison to that 10%. But not the additional 10% that we are, the total of. It's historical transactions over the past 3 years was 10%, an average of 10% growth. What we saw in growth from 2017 to 2018 in transactions was actually 22%, which would have brought that average more in line at 14%.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. Any recross?
Ms. Hunsaker, going back to the questions, the $4.7 million, and then Commissioner Belzer's questions regarding forecasts and estimates and all that you use. It's your testimony now that you have actual costs, right?
We do, yes.
So you have actual costs and everything, except you still have that multiplier for inflation, right, which is just based on an estimate.
We have actuals for 2018. And then the difference there is what we believe are known and measurable, but they're setting in contingency today.
The rest is the inflation rate, like, for instance. That's not a known and measurable. That's a going forward number that's an estimate, correct?
Right. The contingency is what I feel strong about.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schneider, we're talking about the data from the meters, the AMI meters and all. And Commissioner Belzer had asked you some questions as well about factors that might be used in these meters and all. Isn't it, when you deploy these, don't you in some instances use an estimated bill for a period?
So there are cases where we design the mesh, the RF mesh system for the AMI solution. We install the communication devices out in the field. Following, we install the meters. Obviously, a large percentage of the time they pick right up. They read into the communications network. But we do have times where in our design, we thought we would pick up a meter, and it ends up that the meter cannot read. And so we have to mitigate that instance. And in some cases, that does take more than a month and can result in 1 or 2 month estimate for a customer.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the Ms. Quick. I got just one question or two for you here too. Going back to the questions, and I think this is Commissioner Irvin's points. He had asked a question about data mining and the information that y'all are obtaining from customers now. Don't you also use, or isn't there an intent to use that information that you obtained to also try and market other Duke services to your customers?
What we keep in my billing system is the customer name and address, billing, zip code, et cetera. So we do use that data to market energy efficient products, for example, to our customers.
And going to when this whole program and system goes into effect, again, that benefits aren't going to be realized, and this might be the one of you too. Benefits aren't to be realized until 2020. Is that right?
That is not correct. We are realizing benefits for our customers starting in 2018 all the way through 2022.
Okay. So it's and I guess, could you tell me a little bit then, that's a phase-in of certain benefits?
It is multiple releases, and we're phasing in benefits along the way. But we built this in a way that we were able to deliver value every year. That's why we have 8 releases and multiple durable drops of functionality along that timeline.
Are you still using, is there a growth factor then that's still connected in with this that is an added cost to it? Have you added this growth factor in as part of the cost?
I'm not sure what you mean by growth factor.
And I think more what I'm talking about is, Ms. Quick, I think this is going to go to you. I think what I'm talking about with the growth factor goes to the use of the credit cards. So part of what you have put in that system with the use of credit cards is actually based on including a growth factor. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And what do you base that growth factor on?
So what we had in the pro forma to include in the cost of service was a 20% growth rate. So it's twofold. So 10% of that 20%, so half of it is based on the historical growth in credit card transactions. So without offering free credit card fee payments, we are seeing an average of 10% growth in credit card transactions. So the additional 10% that I alluded to that equates to the 20% is related to when you do start offering free payment via credit card, we know that customers will start using that method more. And based on research that a third-party payment processing vendor has done, it said that your existing natural increase, the 10% I referred to earlier, would at least double. So that, and then we also looked at some other utility filings to say that that 10% was in line with anything we saw in utilities from 5 to 30%. So I would say it's more conservative on the lower end of what other utilities were projecting as far as an increase in adoption once it's free for customers to pay that way.
What's this whole program, though, because there is a cost, is what you're saying, right? I mean, Duke believes that there is a cost, and that will be included in rates to this increased use of credit cards and all, right?
Yes.
Okay, and included in that cost, then, is this growth factor as well, right? Your estimated growth.
Yes.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other recross? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Mr. Smith.
Chairman, at this time, I'd ask if the witnesses can be excused.
My fault. You may be excused. Thank you for your testimony.